Perfectionism. Do you spend hours drafting a simple thank you email? Even the microscopic possibility of a wrong punctuation makes you spiral. If that's you, welcome to the land of perfectionists. To casual observers, you seem detail-oriented, but beneath the surface, it often feels like walking a tightrope while carrying the fear that one wobble will prove every awful thing you've suspected about yourself. This drive usually traces back to childhood settings where approval was conditional and criticism arrived faster than comfort. In those environments, flawlessness was an armor. If perfection was the only thing that kept chaos away, your nervous system logged it as a non-negotiable survival rule. Perfectionism can push the stress response into overdrive. The brain equates error with danger, prompting hypervigilance and eventually paralysis. But here's the truth. Perfectionism rarely produces brilliance. It causes exhaustion. You can practice experimenting, stumbling, revising, and still being worthy. Aim for good enough in everyday tasks and reserve peak performance for activities that actually deserve it, like disarming the smoke detector you set off while overcooking dinner. Procrastination. You sit down to start a task and suddenly your body behaves like someone unplugged you. To people who haven't experienced it, this behavior looks like indifference, yet inside it often feels like trying to start a car with a dead battery. The urge to act is there, but the software that's supposed to hit go has crashed. This paralysis reflects the freeze response, sometimes called dorsal vagal collapse, a shutdown mode shaped by chronic stress or emotional neglect. When your brain predicts overwhelm, fear circuitry in your amygdala lights up, while the prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning and initiation, powers down. The mind chooses short-term relief, scrolling, snacking, napping, over the discomfort required to begin. What's encouraging is that this form of procrastination responds especially well to trauma-focused interventions like EMDR and somatic experiencing. Progress doesn't require perfect momentum. It starts with tiny movements that reassure your body the task isn't a threat. Begin with one small action, enough to remind your nervous system you're piloting a project, not escaping a predator. Humor as a shield. You have a talent for cracking jokes in moments where most people switch to their serious face. People laugh, but then they side-eye you and think you might need help. From a distance, it reads as charm. Up close, it functions like an emotional bubble wrap, softening every feeling before it can actually affect you. This habit often forms when emotional honesty once felt risky. Humor becomes the quickest way to neutralize discomfort, a strategy refined by people who learned early that vulnerability could be met with judgment or danger. But this shortcut has a cost. Irony and sarcasm activate stress pathways more than warmth does, and emotional awareness gets muffled behind the noise. A steady stream of jokes can create a wall of laughter that blocks grief, connection, and clarity. Humor isn't the enemy. Overuse is. You can practice naming one real feeling before the joke arrives, building conversations where honesty comes first and the punchline becomes seasoning. Save the heavy sarcasm for Twitter, where sincerity goes to die anyway. People-pleasing. You've spent years acting like human emotional Velcro, sticking to whatever mood, preference, or opinion the other person presents. People call you thoughtful. Meanwhile, you haven't had a genuine preference since the 2000s. This reflex emerges from the fawn response, a survival adaptation in homes where fight or flight would have made things worse. When a caregiver was unpredictable, your nervous system learned to soothe, smooth, and stabilize the environment. The ventral vagus nerve, part of the social engagement system, became your internal fire alarm, tracking micro-expressions and adjusting your behavior in real time. Safety depended on keeping the peace, so you said whatever pleases others to avoid retaliation or rejection. But this chronic self-erasure leads to emotional exhaustion and blurred identity. Many survivors even turn unexpressed anger inward, developing self-criticism or shame, rather than risking external conflict. What makes this especially tricky is that society often applauds the behavior. Being endlessly agreeable is praised as maturity or kindness, which disguises the trauma roots beneath it. It's okay to have preferences, boundaries, and the occasional no, even if it feels like breaking rules when it's totally fine. Hoarding. You keep items long after their purpose has expired. Ticket stubs, torn underwear, charging cables that don't plug into anything. To outsiders, it reads a simple disorganization. But on the inside, it can feel more like safeguarding a personal archive. This instinct often develops out of loss-based trauma. When childhood involved abrupt separations, rough handling, or belongings taken without consent, possessions became reliable companions in an unpredictable world. Many people trace the beginnings of hoarding tendencies to stressful transitions, as if surrounding themselves with objects could rebuild a sense of continuity when everything else felt unstable. Psychologically, chronic stress can heighten emotional attachment to items, while trauma can create concerns about memory. Keeping objects becomes a way to preserve what feels endangered. You can learn to build safety in ways that don't require a mountain of old batteries. Let the decluttering begin gently, and keep the sentimental objects that genuinely matter. Apologizing for everything. Some people start the day with coffee. You start it by apologizing to the cabinet door you bumped with your elbow. You insist it's just being considerate, yet the apologies erupt with the enthusiasm of confetti cannons. It creates the impression that you came with a built-in guilt subscription that renews hourly. This habit didn't appear out of nowhere. In childhood homes where tempers shifted faster than weather, kids learned to steady the environment by assuming blame. An apology acted like a small offering to keep chaos at bay. For many survivors, that offering simply turned automatic. But the body kept the rules of the childhood home. The sympathetic nervous system jumps the gun, the startle response reacts like a fire alarm near burnt toast, and the amygdala keeps flagging harmless interactions as potential crises. Sorry becomes an immediate reaction. This reflex is a relic of survival training. You can practice pausing, stating needs without shrinking, and letting silence exist without apologizing into it. Keep the heartfelt apologies for genuine errors, like when you add pineapple to pizzas, not for occupying physical space. Hyperindependence. You would rather juggle 17 responsibilities with one exhausted hand than let someone else carry a single grocery bag. From the outside, it looks admirably self-sufficient. Up close, it resembles a one-person survival bunker built out of stubbornness and caffeine. This instinct often traces back to childhood environments where relying on others was a luxury you didn't have. When caregivers were inconsistent or emotionally absent, your system learned a brutal rule of operation. Safety comes from depending on no one. Hyper-independence became the armor you forged because no one showed up when it counted. The brain reflects those early conditions. Chronic neglect can reshape reward pathways, making the usual social bonding chemicals like dopamine and oxytocin less reinforcing. And self-reliance becomes the only strategy that lowers your stress response, even if it drains you long-term. The world often mistakes this for strength. Praise for being so capable sticks to you like superglue, reinforcing the habit and blocking the healing that comes from healthy interdependence. But self-sufficiency isn't your destiny. You are allowed to let others carry part of the weight. Keep your independence for things like assembling IKEA furniture and ask for help when the stress becomes too much. Eating too fast. You eat like a lab who hasn't eaten in days. While friends are still unfolding their napkins, you're already licking your plate clean. To others, it can seem efficient and impressive. But this habit frequently traces back to childhood environments shaped by scarcity or chaos. When meals were rushed, unpredictable, or emotionally charged, eating fast became a survival tactic. Trauma research shows that early neglect can disrupt the systems that regulate hunger, stress, and bodily awareness. Early interpersonal trauma can distort signals of satiety and emotional regulation, making rapid eating feel soothing in the moment. Conditions like binge eating often develop when stress or relational conflict overwhelms the nervous system, prompting the body to seek fast, numbing comfort. But don't despair. You can practice slowing a meal without fear by taking tiny pauses, taking deeper breaths, and intentionally tasting what you're eating. Save the rapid-fire consumption for situations that deserve it, like racing your siblings for the last drumstick at family dinner. Difficulty accepting compliments. Praise lands on you like an unexpected splash of cold water. Instead of a simple thank you, you scramble for flaws, disclaimers, or burst into aimless rambling. Others might think you're just modest, but in reality, this reflex often begins in childhood environments where warmth was scarce or quickly withdrawn. When criticism was constant or praise came with strings attached, your nervous system learned that positive attention wasn't safety. It was actually unpredictability. A compliment now creates a clash between external approval and an internal self-image shaped by neglect or belittlement. To quiet that psychological friction, rejecting the compliment feels easier than letting it in. Over time, this avoidance can bleed into other forms of recognition, affection, achievements, professional rewards. Imposter syndrome becomes a philosophy, built on the belief that being seen positively is dangerous. But this reflex is learned, not fixed. You can practice receiving small positives without bracing for impact. Let the kind words land gently, the way you'd accept a free sample at a grocery store. The urge to ghost people. You've had a conversation where everything seemed fine and then you stopped replying, simply because answering felt like pushing a boulder up a hill. You call it being bad at messages, yet you can scroll with Olympic-level stamina. This pattern is not laziness. It's the flight side of the stress response showing up in the digital age. For a nervous system shaped by emotional neglect or abrupt abandonment, closeness can feel less like comfort and more like a trap. As a bond deepens, the stakes rise, and your body starts planning the escape route like a fire drill. Inside, the system overloads. The amygdala keeps scanning for danger, even when nothing is wrong. Meanwhile, the vagus nerve, which helps regulate calm and connection, can slip into dorsal vagal shutdown, a state where the body conserves energy by disconnecting. Social contact starts to feel physically impossible. Ghosting becomes the quickest path to safety. Relief arrives first, but regret and loneliness usually follow later. This urge to disappear is not proof that you are cold. It is evidence that you are scared. You are allowed to stay while feeling overwhelmed and to answer slowly instead of evaporating. Save the ghosting for spam calls or texts that sell you get-rich-quick courses. Over-explaining. You've likely caught yourself reciting a 5-paragraph persuasive essay on why you chose a particular snack, GPS route, or outfit, as if National Geographic asked for a documentary. To others, it reads as nervous rambling, but inside, it can feel like you're trying to outrun an invisible accusation. This habit often grows from environments where your words were twisted, ignored, or used against you. In households marked by gaslighting or unpredictable reactions, every action had to be justified with airtight logic. Your brain learned that clarity equaled safety, and silence equaled risk. Over the years, that vigilance hardened into habit. An overactive amygdala keeps scanning conversations for threats, flooding the system with urgency. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, which normally trims unnecessary detail, loses its grip under stress. The result is this: your explanations multiply like rabbits. Over-explaining is often an attempt to give yourself the validation you didn't receive growing up, a kind of real-time self-parenting. You can practice offering shorter answers without fear. The world won't collapse if you skip the footnotes. Save the exhaustive detail for assembling furniture, tax season, or any scenario where humanity truly needs the manual. Productivity guilt. The moment you stop moving, an internal alarm buzzes, insisting you should be folding laundry, answering emails, or starting your 5th small business enterprise. For you, rest registers as malfunction. People might assume you're driven. What they don't see is the quiet panic that shows up whenever you aren't performing. This mindset often forms in childhoods where affection or stability depended on compliance and usefulness. When a child learns that being low maintenance or endlessly productive keeps the peace, they internalize a harsh rule: motion equals safety. Shame takes root early, especially in environments where neglect or criticism taught you that your needs were burdens rather than signals. Shame and dissociation can warp your sense of self so thoroughly that rest feels dangerous. The stress system primes you to avoid stillness, pushing you toward constant activity, even if it leads straight into burnout. But usefulness is not your identity. A brief stretch on the couch, a wander outside, even the occasional brain rot scroll on TikTok. These are small reminders that being alive isn't the same thing as being on duty. Think of it this way: even your phone gets to recharge without filing a report. Lying about small things. You hear a harmless question: did you eat the last cookie? But before your brain has time to load the truth, a tiny lie slips out of your mouth. Half the time you walk away wondering why you even said it. This habit usually forms in childhood environments where honesty carries a cost. If the truth once triggered anger, ridicule, or punishment, the nervous system learned to treat even harmless facts like hidden landmines. Many survivors constructed a protective persona early on, an adjustable version of themselves that kept conflict at bay. Small lies became part of that shield, not for personal gain, but for emotional safety. Later, the reflex lingers, and shame tags along for the ride. You tell a pointless lie, immediately regret it, and wonder why your survival instincts are out here firing during conversations about snack foods. It's not all doom and gloom. This reflex softens with practice. Offering small truths in low-stakes moments can retrain your system to recognize safety. And if an occasional pointless lie escapes, don't panic. You're just updating outdated software to the latest version. Indecisiveness. Choosing what to eat at a restaurant feels to you like choosing the fate of two small nations. It can seem dramatic to outsiders, but your mind isn't just debating food. It's literally debating safety. This difficulty often traces back to childhoods shaped by chronic stress, where the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that helps with decision-making, developed under stress. When someone grows up adapting to others' needs to stay safe, their own preferences never had room to form. Instead, decisions were made based on who needed what, not on what you wanted. The habit sticks, leaving you without an internal compass calibrated to your own life. Ironically, researchers note that this hesitation often disappears during real emergencies. When alarms blare, the survival systems take command and you act with startling clarity. It's the everyday choices that short-circuit the system because there's no obvious path marked danger or safety. Learning to choose without dread is possible. Start with low-stakes decision and take your time. Even if dinner takes you 30 minutes to decide, that's fine. The pasta isn't going anywhere. If you liked this video and want to learn more about the human body, check out these other videos.